So why don't we get started? Welcome to Felix Valley State Historic Site. I'm Bob Mueller. I'm with the Foundation for Restoration of St. Genevieve and also work sometimes with the Felix Valley House. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about our French and German Christmas customs. We were French, obviously, from the beginning, all the way up through 1763 when we became Spanish, but we kept speaking French here. Well, even after the Americans came in 1804. The Germans actually started coming in mass about 1832. That's when my first ancestor came. And from that time period all the way up through about 1880, there was a major German migration, which really changed a lot of the town, but not the religion of the town. The French were Catholic, and a lot of their French traditions for Christmas were Catholic, and also most of the Germans that came here came from the Black Forest, Swabia, and Bavaria. So they were Southern Germans and also were Catholic. So we're going to talk about the French Noël, which is, Noël in French is Christmas. And the season, the French they like to party. There's no question about it. Their season went from December 6th all the way into January 6th. And today we're going to talk about a variety of things that related to the French and how they celebrated Christmas. So they don't call him St. Nicholas. They call him Père Noël, Père Father Christmas. And typically he's portrayed as coming with a donkey. Anybody know what the donkey's name is? It's Guy. And Guy in French means mistletoe. So now you know Santa's donkey's name is mistletoe. And as many things when we grew up as youngsters, we heard about these characters that if we were a bad child, Santa's helper was going to bring us either coal or switches. Well, the French have one. He's called Père Father. And he has sticks, and he comes along with Santa. And they actually have people that dress up as Père Father in France to kind of walk along and caution the children. So one of the French traditions, I'm going to talk about some general French traditions and then some that are local. And one of the local ones is called the Procession of the White Lily. When St. Genevieve was founded about 1750, we actually belonged to the parish in Kaskaskia across the river, Immaculate Conception. Immaculate Conception started in 1702 with the founding of Kaskaskia. For those of you in central Illinois, it was your first state capital, by the way, also, but it got swept away by the flood of 1880. But there was an Illinois tribe Indian woman. She was from a house, she was destitute and somewhat of an alcoholic, and they were going to have this procession in honor of the Virgin Mary at church, and she didn't have a gift to bring to church. And it's wintertime, early December, and on the way to church, there's snow on the ground. She finds a lily growing, and she brings that lily to church. And the Immaculate Conception Church is now on Kaskaskia Island, which is on the Missouri side of the river, but it's still part of Illinois. And next weekend, or next Saturday, they are going to celebrate the Procession of the White Lily. And they sing the song in the Illinois language. So it's a very pretty ceremony. Only women get to be in the procession. And they all carry flowers up for the altar of Mary. So one of the other things that the French did is they had something called a crèche, a manger scene. And it's not kind of like the ones that we typically do today with Mary and Joseph and the Christ child and the shepherds and the angels and the three wise men. Theirs, they might have that. And if any of you were over at the Réveillon, you saw that they had a crèche set there. That's actually theirs. But I took the picture. And they have Jesus, Mary, Joseph, the wise men, all of that. But one of the things they also do is they put like little village people all around. And it's this was really a more of a southern Provence part of France where this started. They're usually made out of clay or other soft materials, and they paint them in various configurations. We have a village mayor. This is a typical Alsatian lady, you can tell by her hat. You have a blacksmith, a fisherman, and a lady that sells herbs. So they'll have a whole scene of these little santo, which means saint. Everybody has legends about Christmas. It's a pretty magical time. And some of the ones that the French had was that the earth opens up to reveal its treasures on Christmas Day. And farm animals give the gift of speech at midnight. But you never, they always caution you, don't go out to the barn to see if the cows are going to be speaking tonight, because if you hear them, you're going to be deaf and dumb for a year. Farm cattle kneel at the stroke of midnight, and the dead rise up from their graves and only go back until they have a mass. We got a problem in our cemetery because there's no priest buried there in our old one. I don't know how they did that. But one of the more famous ones that came to us from Canada is called the Chasse Galerie, which is the flying canoe. And Christmas time, that period was always very special to Frenchmen. And some of them would be out in the woods, coureurs de bois, voyageurs, paddling someplace where they would be out cutting lumber. And they didn't want to, they really wanted to be home for this party. So they made a pact with the devil. And they said, get us back to Quebec. We're going to party. We'll come back on Epiphany. The devil said, fine. Only one thing you can't utter the word God. So they went back to Quebec and they were partying and so they were all hung over on January the 7th, and they're coming back and they're flying through the sky, and one of the guys sobers up and he looks down and he sees how high they are and he says, mon Dieu, my God, and they crash, and that's the end of the so don't take the name of the Lord in vain. This is the one of the things awaiting Père Noel, I think if you were over there today, you saw that they typically have shoes. I didn't look today. Those are called sabots, wooden shoes. The French are a little bit different than the ones we're typically used to seeing. They have more of the rounded toe. But they would leave carrots. And who are they leaving carrots for?
The donkey.
The donkey. Yeah. I don't think Santa was a vegetarian. One of the other things I said that they were very religious. One of the most important times of the year was what was called Messe de Minuit. What post was that? Will's a French teacher, so they would go to midnight mass, and it was a big deal. Everybody went except like maybe a mother or a grandmother and the very little children. And in fact, there was, I think in about 1805, a priest showed up in St. Louis. And St. Louis was founded a little bit after St. Genevieve. They didn't have a priest till, in the 1770s. And they always didn't have one. But he came, and it was said it was very cold. But a few people did show up for the mass. We always said St. Louis was a little rowdier than St. Genevieve. Great rivalry between the two towns. One of the great things about St. Genevieve, we had a young boy, his name Henry Marie Breckenridge. His father was a judge in Pittsburgh, and he decided his son needed to learn to speak French. So the nearest French-speaking town was St. Genevieve. So he sends this 7-year-old boy to St. Genevieve. And later in life, he writes this book called Recollections of Persons and Places in the West. And he writes about coming to St. Genevieve, the people that he lived with, and the house that he lived in. And that house is still here. It's one of the 3 post-in-the-ground houses, the Vital St. Genevieve Day house. But somehow, Henry, he wins a prize in the French class. He only knew 2 words when he got here, French, oui and bon. And when he left, 3 years later, he'd forgotten how to speak English, but he remembered it later. But he actually writes about going up to church an hour before midnight mass, and he said he just sat there. The church was lit up with the biggest candles the town could afford. And he just reflected on that for a while. They even said he was an altar boy. He wasn't Catholic, but Mrs. Beauvais wouldn't let him sleep with the other children unless he got baptized, so it's pretty important to him. The French would not only attend midnight mass, they would attend 2 other masses. It was one of their biggest holidays. One of the traditions was that the children, when they had the crèche scene, the children would carry baby Jesus up and put him in the manger. And the other thing they would do is mold 3 candles together, and that's kind of the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And one of the special things here is something called pain béni, and means blessed bread. And it was very traditional in colonial St. Genevieve for one of the women of the village to make this special loaf of bread at Christmas. And they would take it to midnight mass, the priest would bless it, and then it would go back to, they'd take a piece of it home to the people that couldn't be there. Breckenridge said he liked being an altar boy because he got a bigger piece of this. But we had this one priest, Father Hilaire, who was quite the rascal. He didn't do very well in New Orleans, so they sent him up here, and he got into it with the Valley family, which he never wanted to do because they were powerful ones. And so one year, Mrs. Truteau baked the pain béni, and the priest wouldn't bless it. He said she was a scandalous woman. And there's letters going down to New Orleans about this priest not blessing the bread, and he tore up the rectory, and just not one of our favorite priests. But some of the things that the French had were music, and this very first one, I don't know how many of you have heard of the Huron carol. It's really our oldest Christmas song. It was written in 1642, North American Christmas song. It was written by Jean de Brebeuf, a Jesuit priest, and he worked with the Hurons. And it was called "'Twas the Moon of Wintertime." This lady sings this song in Wyandot, French, and English. It's Jesus Ahatahan. So here's this missionary trying to convert the Hurons, and he writes this Christmas song. If you want to stick around afterwards, we can play the whole thing. So it's really pretty in French too. Another one that you may have heard before, it's a really old, it was originally written to be a dance tune for the nobles, but around 13th century, I believe, and then it was later converted to Bring a Torch, Jeanette, and Isabella. Again, I think when I listen to Christmas music in French, it's just good. So here's another one, you'll recognize this one. Les anges dans nos campagnes. So it's a favorite English song at Christmas time. So here's another one. Il est né, de devenir enfant. He was born the Divine Christ Child, and we still sing this one at Midnight Mass here in St. Genevieve. I'm going to play you two versions of this. Sometimes the intro's a little long, I should have clipped it. Some of you may have heard this song, sang it before. So the music that evolved around this area came kind of from Quebec, and it's its own particular style. We call it Upper Louisiana fiddle music, and there's a guy named Dennis Stromat that plays it. Now, here's this is a very churchy Christmas song. This is Dennis's version. Again, he has a long intro. I forgot how long this intro was. I think the thing about this is it's almost like a dance tune. It's supposed to be a Christmas song. So here's another one. This is in French, Du bientôt Bergère. This is a choir from the little town of Pong. And it's, again, you can see here, you can almost feel yourself being in a French cathedral and listening to this music. This is Dennis's. And you can hear him play here in St. Genevieve a number of times during the year. He teaches a language that not only is our music different, our French was different here. It was called Pawpaw French. And one of our experts is sitting right here that studies the old mines, Missouri, that still spoke Pawpaw French well into the 1920s and 30s. So, like I said, when Dennis plays it, you can get up and dance, even if you're in church, I guess. So one of the things we had today was Le Réveillon, and after midnight mass, they would all go back home and they would have this big meal. Le Réveillon means the awakening, and it would be a big party that would go on until early morning, and then you'd get up and go to mass again. And Felix Valley celebrates this, or memorializes this every year, and if you were over there, you saw some of these dishes that are very traditional to Le Réveillon, and one of them is to leave a candle, one candle burning in the window for the Mary and Joseph, so they can see that there's a place. So kind of a French tradition. And the food, one of the more favorite ones is the tortillere, and that really comes from Canada. It's a meat pie, crust on the bottom, crust on the top. In France, they made tortilleries, but they didn't have as many turkeys over there at Adventkranz. And anybody know what dinde noir is?
Some kind of black sausage.
Black sausage, and that means blood sausage. Yeah, it's good. And sometimes they would have bread and cheese. So if you were over there today, you heard about the 13 desserts, les 13 desserts of Christmas. Again, this is a Provence custom to do this. And they would do sugar cookies. Pain d'épices is French gingerbread. I think you probably saw gingerbread men over there. In France, it's typically a loaf, also highly spiced. A syrup cake, good old apple pie, madeleines. Over there they had a croquembouche, which is a little puff pastry, all built up in a pyramid with spun sugar on it. One that was very popular around here is coquinoles, which is bread dough. Everybody fries bread dough. We have donuts. This was the French donut. And when the French got here, they found we had walnut trees, but they didn't like our walnuts. They didn't taste like the walnuts on the continent, but they did make pies out of them. The other thing they had that down on the lower left is mincemeat pie, which is a way to preserve beef for the winter. You could put it with fruit and sugar and can it. And then a pound cake, sugared pecans, because we have these marvelous pecan trees around here. They're little bitty pecans, but they're very tasty. I always say they're like a wild blackberry versus a tame blackberry. And the last was dried fruit. St. Genevieve was well known for its apples and its pears and its peaches. We had down in front of the show me shop, there used to be a pear tree that was 100 years old there. There were only 12, right on that last screen. So the big one was La Bûche de Noël, which is the Christmas log. And that kind of is reminiscent of the Yule log that they would burn. And you know, the Yule log is you light it and you can party till the Yule log burnt up. So what do? You go out and get the greenest log you can find. Another tradition is called a bouillon. And a bouillon means two things in our country. It means a soup. You take an old chicken and you boil it with vegetables. It should include cabbage and a turnip, carrots, celery, onions. And then when it's done, you take the chicken out and take the meat off the bones, and you serve the soup first as a broth, and then you serve the vegetables and the chicken. Now, it was in best practice here that the best bouillon was made with your neighbor's chicken. So you went out and stole your neighbor's chicken to make a bouillon, and it was de rigueur to invite him to the party, and his role was to say, "This is the best bouillon I ever had." Now this was a tradition not only here, and I found it in newspapers where they said it's bouillon season, hide your chickens. Cahokia had, which is up near St. Louis, had the same kind of thing happen. So a bouillon is not only a meal, it's a party. So when you're invited to a bouillon, either here in St. Genevieve or in Prairie du Rocher or Old Mines, you're going to a party and you're going to have good food. A lot of times, restaurants would serve this during the week. Sometimes they would, when you went and played cards, you'd have a bouillon to go along with it. The French call this time period from Christmas to Epiphany is the time of the festivals, and it would end with the Feast of the Three Kings on Epiphany, and it was a pretty good party time. There was a guy, an American, that came through here, I think in about 1791, and he said the town was all aglow for a week, and the French did like to party, no question about it. And one of the things, I don't know if you know it, in France and in Germany, New Year's Eve is called St. Sylvester's night, not New Year's Eve. And so here we have a custom that goes way back, some think all the way to the Druids, that on New Year's Eve, people would dress up in costume, some outlandish thing, and they would go from house to house, and they'd knock on the door, and they would start singing this song called the La Guillenée. And they beg pardon when they walk in, and then they ask for a side of beef, or a chin of beef, 90 feet long for the party coming up, or the eldest daughter to dance the night away, which would scare the oldest daughter. And it's a kind of a song that they have a chanter and then a response, and they kind of go around in a circle. And we still do that on New Year's Eve. And I mentioned Dennis Stromat's going to be here. He always plays on New Year's Eve. And we have a group, most of them are Germans now, but they're singing this French song. I don't think they know what the words is, but they have a lot of fun. And it's called Running the Guillenée. And they used to go from house to house to do this, and then they decided, let's get a bus. It's a lot easier to get around. So they start off about 6 o'clock, and they go to the nursing homes, they go to the schools, and then they go to some of the houses like the Bolduc and Felix Valley, and then they go to all the bars. And when they get into a bar, they are offered a drink. So by the end of the night, it's a pretty good party. And it also happened in Illinois. They still do this at I guess at the fort, Prairie du Rocher, they sing the La Guillenée. And over at Old Mines, they do it. At one time, Bloomsdale, we've had women Guillenée groups. We've had African Guillenée groups. We've had children Guillenée groups. I even found the words in German. Zell. Kind of interesting. So you can see what kind of costumes they're doing. This gets passed down from family to family. Like the guy down on the left is the son, I don't know if I can see him in here, but he's been doing La Guillenée, and his father did Guillenée, and his grandfather did Guillenée. So we just still do have some Frenchmen that get involved in this, but like I said, I have to say, we have women in our Guillenée group now. This is Dennis playing the La Guillenée. Again, he has a long intro, sorry. So the purpose of the La Guillenée was to gather food for the King's Ball, or sometimes they would do it for the poor. Gather food. But it sparks controversy. There's all different kinds of ways that you can spell and say Guillenée, Guillenée. I prefer the first one up there. That's the way I usually spell it. But we had two newspapers in town. One started in 1872 and the other one started in 1882, and they were on two different political bents, and they argued about everything. And one of the things they argued about was the words and the spelling of Guillenée. we don't have all the newspapers for that time period, but it would make a wonderful two-person play of these two guys going at each other. I call it editorial fisticuffs. The one editor called the editor of Perryville the liar of the worst sorts. We could say a lot more about it. A couple other customs after New Year's Eve. You had New Year's Day. There were two big customs here. One was the paternal blessing, where the children and the adults went to the house of the oldest family member and asked for their blessing, and the father would stand there and he'd say, "Will, have you been good to your sister this year?" And Will would go, "Yeah," because they got little presents and a blessing from that. The other one is called the exchange of kisses on New Year's Day, and we had a guy, Christian Schultz, came through here in about 1807, 1808. He said there was a strange custom that day. Everybody started kissing everybody. He says the slave kissed his master, and the master kissed his madam, and the master kissed his wenches. I wanted to revive that kissing the wenches, but my wife over there wouldn't let me. So one of the things was a New Year's greeting, good year, and may paradise at the end of the days be yours. And one of the other things on New Year's Day was called Jour de la Marmaille, which is where the little kids would go to their godparents. Godparents were very important in the French customs, and when you look at the parish records, they always had the moraine and the parrain, who they were going to be. So you'd go and you'd get little gifts, candy, small items of toy, clothes, and that sort of thing. The French loved to dance. I mean, they loved to dance, among other things. But and so that traditionally they would have on Epiphany, they would have the King's Ball, the Bal de Roi. And one of the guys that came through here, I think Thomas Ashe, I think about 1806, he said the principal dances were the minuet, the waltz, the pas de deux, and the fandango. At that time we had some Spanish influences here, so that's how, I guess, how the fandango got in there. But King's Balls were celebrated up in Quebec. I was reading a Spanish document very early, I mean it's 1767, an army guy up in St. Louis sent a guy down to St. James to get food. While he was down here, he started going to a ball, and he was giving stuff to this one lady so she was the queen, and he got in big trouble for that. Again, a letter went all the way down to New Orleans on his behavior. So we still celebrate this. We don't do it on Epiphany. We do it typically on the first Saturday of February. We have dances, and then about midway through the ball, they bring out cakes, and they have a cake for people, little kids and juniors, and then for adults. And if you find this little plastic baby Jesus, you're going to be the king. And there's 3 beans in the cake, which are for the attendants. We've had some strange things. We've had somebody swallow the little baby Jesus. We've had people give it away. They didn't want to be king. And about 20 years ago, we started Queen's Balls. Every 4 years on leap year, we do a Queen's Ball rather than a King's Ball. But it's a lot of fun. And we have people that dress in colonial garb, and we have people that come in prom dresses and tuxedos. And typically, we have a band that teaches how to do the dance steps, and they'll go through practices, and then you start dancing. It's really funny to watch all the people starting, and it's like mayhem at the beginning. But these are very long songs, and by the end, these people are really doing dancing. One of them is called the paddle dance, where you have 2 lines, and one's a girl and one's a boy, and so the girl starts, she's got a paddle, and the 2 boys come up, one on each side, and she gives one of them the paddle, and she goes dancing down through the line with the other one. It's the only chance where an old guy can get a young girl to go dancing down the... So it's a lot of fun. This year we're having trouble. COVID, we didn't have one last year, and this year our band's got a lot of illness, and we're not sure if we're going to have it. So watch the schedule. We bring food. Bouillon was something they brought in the old days. I think Reynolds, who wrote the history of Illinois, said sometimes they have coffee and bouillon, but not much else. They like the dance. And a lot of times they would dance till dawn. Oh, this is another Stromat song that's kind of typical of the kind of music we would have at the King's Ball. We also might do a German schottisch, a waltz. They throw in a polka occasionally too. So that was our French, and I'm going to switch to our German. That's kind of my heritage. And again, the Christmas season started a little bit earlier for the Germans on the first Sunday of Advent, and then went all the way to Epiphany, the same as the French, Heilige Drei Könige, which is the Holy Three Kings. The German word for Christmas is kind of funny. It's called Weihnachten. The German W is a V. And they also have a lot, like the French, the food, the music, the customs and legends, so we'll keep some of those. So you might be used to some of these. The Advent Wreath, very German, called Adventkranz. And this really goes back to around 1600 when they started it. There's a meaning to all of that. The candles, usually you have 3 purple and 1 rose called for Gaudete Sunday. And the white one in the middle is for Christmas. But even the greenery that they used back then meant a lot to it. I mean, this wreath is a circle of life, and some could be strength and healing, immortality, seeds that you might put on it. So this was a way that the Germans celebrated, at least the Catholic Germans, and I think probably even the Lutheran Germans had Advent wreaths. Advent calendars is another thing. These are some pretty elaborate ones from Germany. It goes way, and again, this is probably more Protestant to begin with. I know our kids always got them, if it was at the Methodist church, made them, and our kids got them when we were little. Actually, the one on the right is from Gegenbach, and a rat house is really a city hall. That's what they call them in Germany. By the way, most of them usually have restaurants, so they're pretty good. So, like the French on December the 6th, you have Nicholas Twas, St. Nicholas. And the whole story of Nicholas goes all the way back to about the 3rd or 6th centuries, way back there. And it kind of started was there were 3 girls in this family, very poor. They didn't have any money for a dowry. And back then, dowries were pretty important. In fact, my Mueller grandparents, great-grandparents came to America to get married. They were very poor, and there was a law in Germany at the time that you couldn't get married if you didn't have a dowry. So they came to America and got married a month after they got here. So this is in the 1860s. So St. Nicholas actually brought and left coins in these 3 girls' stockings, and that's kind of where things started with the stockings and the coins. Like Père Fouettard, St. Nicholas has this guy called Neck Rupert, and I think it means something like whipping farmer or something like that. So he's got sticks too. Well, the Germans really like to scare the heck out of you, so they got some other guys. It depends on where you lived in Germany. Yeah, Pelsbach, Pelsnickel, and you can see, I mean, he's kind of a scary guy and kind of make these kids toe the line. One of my favorite is Krampus. He's more Austrian. He's kind of a hairy, horny guy, guy in the middle there. So he's sometimes, look at those poor little boys in the background cowering. Well, then you have Hans Trapp, which is again a hairy horn guy. But one of my favorites is this little guy named Zwarte Piet. And he's not German, but he's Dutch. And if you were a bad child in Holland, good old Zwarte Piet would take you to Spain. Spain ruled Holland for a while, and they didn't like the Spanish. So the worst thing that could happen as a kid, come on now, I'll sign up, take me to Spain. Really. So again, they have legends for Christmas. Rivers turn to wine, again, animals sleep each other. One of the ones that they still kind of do, the tree blossoms bear fruit. It's very traditional. I think it's St. Barbara's Day, which is in early December. They would take a sprig off a fruit tree, an apple tree or something, and want it to bloom by Christmas time. Again, mountains and the earth open up and you get gems. I don't think my ancestors found that. Church bells ring. And the other one was they would drop molten lead into a glass of water, and it would foretell for the girls whether they were going to get married the next year or not. Most of my ancestors came from the Black Forest. Over there's a few, and that's really between France and Germany in the southwest section. You know, you got Alsace-Lorraine on one side, and France, and then you got the Black Forest. And ghosts are very active on Christmas Eve and Epiphany. My mom always talked about poltergeist in our house. The weather each day during those 12 days of Christmas correspond to what the weather of January, February, March was going to be. So whatever happened on the first day is what's going to happen in January. And if you wash your clothes during that time, you will wash someone out of your life for the year. My wife loves to do laundry. You can't do it during that week. So in Germany, the crib is called a Weihnachtskrippe. The one on the left is actually the one that I grew up with. My brother still has it. It's, I think, a Montgomery Ward or one of those stores back there. Very simple, but it was very special to us. And he always sets it up every year. We always had a blue light with a star on the top of the tree. So, and we have one ornament. It's a 1950s silver, shiny, bright, and dim. And I grew up in a family of 6 boys, and he told my dad, that's all we're going to fight over. It's that ornament. One of the brothers has it, but he wouldn't admit it. So this is the crib, Weihnachtskrippe, at our church. And if you've not been to our church, please go to it. It's very big. A lot of people think it's a cathedral. It's not. It was very big because the French were Catholic, and then when the Germans came, they were predominantly Catholic. And the stone church we had from 1837 to 1880 had to get bigger, so they built the brick church. This thing takes up the whole altar on the side, and the figures are about this big. They're over 100 years old. I grew up in Farmington, but my mom was from here, and she'd bring us over every year to see the crib in the Catholic Church. It's a pretty magical time in our church because it's beautifully decorated. Midnight Mass with singing Ilene, and then we cut in. Just beautiful. One of the things that I had in my childhood was something called a Weihnachtskrippe Lam, or a Putzlam, and the Putz comes from the Pennsylvania Dutch. Instead of doing a crib and the Santos or the French, they would do like a little village scene. And one of the things they made were little lambs, and the legs would be made out of matchsticks. Now my dad told me my grandma made those over in Farmington. She'd take clay and make the body, and then get wool to go around the body, and she would carve those little matchstick legs. And my dad and his brother were the 2 youngest in the family, and as youngest usually get away with a lot more. Grandma would say, okay, we're going to start at the beginning of Advent. You are in Nazareth, and every day that you're good, you get to be a closer step to Bethlehem. Dad and my uncle never got out of Nazareth. So in our family, my brother still has our Putzlam. It's a very good treasure.
Well, did you get anything?
Pardon?
Did you get anything? It seems like your brother's got all of stuff.
Well, I got to some of the other stuff.
Okay.
I'm the historian, so I get all of that stuff. Santa Claus gets various names. We talked about St. Nicholas of Myra, and that's where St. Nick comes from. Actually, in Germany, Santa doesn't bring gifts. It's the Christmas angel, called the Christkind. That's where Kris Kringle comes from, that we have. And Sinterklaas is more Dutch, and that's kind of where Santa Claus came from. One of the things that you may be familiar with is Tannenbaums, called a Weihnachtsbaum. Baum is a tree. Very early on, they were called paradise trees. And the first Christmas tree that we know about was in Strasbourg, which is just across from the Black Forest, in 1605, and they would decorate it with nuts and fruit and little hosts. One of the things they did early on was to hang trees upside down. Remember a few years ago when Target, I think, started coming out with upside down trees, and everybody raised all kinds of ruckus about it? Well, it's very traditional, and it means the Trinity, the Holy Ghost, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And that's kind of before we got into this whole thing about Christmas trees, which was German. And Christmas trees became very common in Germany, and they would go out to get them, and they would cut the tops of trees out to get their Christmas tree, which would kill all the trees. So what they decided to do is they said, no more Christmas tree cutting. So the Germans being inventive, they decided, well, we're gonna make Christmas trees out of goose feathers. You take and make a wooden farm, and you take a goose feather and you strip one side, you dye it, and you wrap it around those arms here. And it's a very small tree, and there's several people in town that have goose feather trees. You can also do it with tinsel. You can do it with boxwood on a frame. So if you can't go out and cut a Christmas tree, you can make something else to do it. Some of the Christmas decorations are German rather than French. Lights are attributed to Martin Luther. He was coming home from a church service at night, walking through the trees. He sees all these pine trees, and he sees these stars lighting up the sky. So he gets this idea of, let's put candles on the tree. And which caused a lot of fires over the years. Actually, in Germany, they do not put up a Christmas tree until Christmas Eve. They have it in a special locked room, and the kids can't go in there until they decorate it. Some of you are familiar with nutcrackers and smokers. They're very German. Ornaments are German from a certain area that did glass blowing. And one is a picture of a pyramid. The way pyramids work, you have these candles, you light them, the hot air goes up and it makes these veins go around. So you have various levels. We have one from Germany, we've had it for almost 48 years. And we just got one from our moms. One of the kids, our grandkids wanted that one really quick. So it's a neat little thing. They make them in all different kinds of sizes. Had anybody ever heard of the legend of the Christmas spider? So I'm giving this talk one day, and some lady says, "You're not talking about the Christmas spider." Well, what happened was there was this lady, and it was coming Christmas time, so she swept up all the house, and all the spiders had to go up in the attic. So the legend is well, she went to bed, she wasn't very wealthy, and after she went to sleep, the spiders all came down, and they started spinning stuff all over the Christmas tree. And St. Nicholas comes in, and he says, "Oh my gosh, she's a clean nut, so this is not gonna look good," so he turns all the silver to gold. That's kind of the legend of how tinsel gets started. So tinsel, tinsel started out being made out of lead. That didn't work too well. Then I think they tried pewter, and now we're to plastic on it. I don't think anybody still do tinsel on their tree. No, it was always a pain to put it on to get it off. Garland, again German, and the candy cane was not originally striped. It was just pure white. And it was supposed to be Jesus' shepherd, or the shepherd crook for the shepherds that came for Christmas. I think there was some guy in Indiana that started putting the red stripe on it.
Yeah, there's a Santa Claus Indiana. I think
Yeah,
that's where it got started.
Been there. She was there when a kid, and then we took our kids there. So some of the traditional holiday foods. The one up on the upper left is my favorite cookie. It's called in the Black Forest Hindenbrötchen. Most people, other places, it's called a Spitzbuben. But you take a cookie, solid cookie on the bottom, jelly or something in the middle, then you have another cookie on top, and then powdered sugar. Well, I happen to like mine with lemon curd in it. And they don't last long. Others that you might find, peppernoose, pepper is pepper, so pepper nut. It's a spicy cookie, a stollen. Now my mom used to make stolens at Christmas. Dresden is probably the most popular one. Actually, Aldi's has a nice stollen. Their cherry one. We're on our second one already, and just the 2nd and 3rd of December. German gingerbread. Remember, French was on the piece. German is Lebkuchen, and a gingerbread house is a Lebkuchenhaus or a Hexenhausle. Now, one of the, some of people like fruitcake, some people don't like fruitcake. St. Genevieve and the Germans here have one called Hutzelbrot. And Hutzel means dried pear in Swabian, which is between Bavaria and Württemberg, and nuts and things like that. I remember my mom making Hutzelbrot. The baker here, one guy said he used to make 1,200 loaves, but at Christmas time, people would come down from St. Louis and buy 25 at a time. So this is a German tradition that families here still continue to have. German New Year's Eve food, at least in our house, or New Year's food, we always had that, on New Year's Eve, my mom always had to have pickled herring and blood sausage. And when we lived in Pennsylvania, it was pork and sauerkraut on Christmas Day, or New Year's Day, and pickled herring. So it's a pig and a fish. And the reason that you eat pork and fish on New Year's Day is a pig can't go backwards, and neither can a fish. So it's a looking forward to the coming year is why you eat that. So in our family, we traditionally on New Year's Day have a big party and have actually a French dish with just sauerkraut and potatoes and all kinds of sausages, choucroute garni. Oh, it's like comfort food. We were at a restaurant in Colmar, France, and I ordered choucroute garni. Linda said all I did was moan the whole time. It was so bad. You haven't figured out by now I'm a foodie. So some songs that the Germans have. This is one you probably recognize. This is a really old one, 1328. This is a little later one, Erstein Rose Sprungen. Again, they like how flowers, and there's really kind of a tradition like that white lily in Germany, which is kind of gets to this rose blooming thing. I shouldn't have spoken so ill about the German songs. I happen to think this was really pretty. And this is O Du Fröhliche. We have a rule in our house, I can't play Christmas music until after Thanksgiving's over. And you'll recognize this last one. It's very famous. It's actually not a German song, it's an Austrian song. There was a little church and the organ was broke and this priest, or the minister wrote this verse and the guy did it to guitar. This kind of takes you to a Christmassy scene with snow, and it's just beautiful. And here's another one that you'll recognize. This one, a friend of mine gave me this songbook it belonged to a little girl, Elizabeth Joggers, in River Falls, which is a little town south of here, in 1894. And this songbook was half in English and half in German. So, this is right out of the songbook. I even liked it had all those little speckles on it and stuff like that. So one of the other customs of the Germans is called Kriegen die Tore, which means on Twelfth Night, where they would go mark the doors with a C, an M, and a B. And the C and the year, it's kind of split up with the 20 and the 06 on the end. And they still do this up in Valley. We don't do it around town, but it was a custom, and that really, the CMB's got two meanings, Casper, Melchior, and Balthazar, which were the three wise men. And the other one is a Latin phrase, Christus mansionem benedicat, which may Christ bless this house. So it's just a nice little German custom that we have. Some things that we're not sure if they're French or German. Christmas stockings, I kind of mentioned, that kind of goes back to St. Nicholas back in very early days. And Christmas coins on the right. I know in the Jewish faith, at Hanukkah, they like to have coins, but golden coins. And those again kind of goes back to the Bishop of Meyer when he put those gold coins in those 3 girls' stockings. So we don't claim, we just like them. It doesn't have to be French or German. Some unusual customs was called, and this was around here, was called turning out the schoolmaster. We didn't have school teachers until around 1800, 1810. But one of the things, and Breckenridge even talks about it, that at Christmas time, the kids didn't want to go to school, so they would lock out the teacher. And one time the teacher went down the chimney, got all dirty, and another one, Breckenridge, I think, wrote about it, about 100 miles from St. Genevieve. This teacher decided to get back in the building, he would give the kids cherry bounce, which is a liquor.
Oh.
And as it was written, the kids got awful sick, and the teacher got fired. Some traditions that are neither French or German. How many have a Christmas pickle? Anybody? Okay. That is not a German custom, though our Christmas pickle was bought in Germany. Have you ever been to Germany? Kathy Wolfhardt's Christmas stores? They are like heaven. But, and the trick is that you put the person that finds the pickle on the tree gets a prize or something. In our family, we had made ornaments for the 2 kids, and when Christmas started, one would be in the front of the tree and one would be in the back of the tree. And all of a sudden, the one in the front would be in the back and the one in the back would be in the front. And this goes on for the whole Christmas season. Christmas cards are not German either, or French. They're really English. Queen Victoria's time, she got excited about Christmas trees, and so they started making Christmas cards. So that's it. Joie Noël et Bonne Année, which is German for Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I'll give you a little more French and German music here. Most of these Christmas songs have been translated into other languages. So the way you say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year in German is Frohe Weihnachten und ein glückliches neues Jahr. I was going to do Old Lang Syne in German. You good, Ross? It's even got bagpipes. I don't know whether German's got this. Just can't start out singing or something. Well, my friends, bonne année and frohe Weihnachten. Hope you all have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. A healthy one too.
Thank you.
Any questions if anybody has
Yes.
them?
You said the fried bread, donuts.
Yeah.
What do they put on them?
Powdered sugar.
That's it?
Or in the old days, they probably just had sugar, maple syrup. We did make maple syrup and maple sugar here. We shipped maple syrup down to New Orleans. We have a road called Sugar Bottom Road, because it went out to the sugaries, and there were some down at River Falls.
I have a question that has nothing to do with, my great-grandparents came from Germany and Poland and not in that area. And we always put our this is underneath Christmas, in a glass of water on the counter. And we didn't put, is that?
That wasn't, in our house, you put it under the pillow and you
I
go
know,
for
but
something.
I don't know where it came from, and I didn't know that till I got a little older. I'm like, what do you mean you can put it in a glass on the counter? You know, I don't know if anybody, I didn't know if it was.
I can tell you the price of a tooth has gone up
Oh, it
considerably.
has. We got a quarter, my daughter got a dollar. We got a quarter, now I don't know what to get for
Oh, it's
$3.
big time.
It's $5.
So that's just, maybe that's just a family thing.
You said that they used to always do midnight mass, but I heard that they quit doing that here.
Well, we don't have midnight mass at midnight. We had midnight mass at 10:30.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it is. Because in the old days, I mean, we were, this was a Catholic town until like the 60s and 70s, it started to transition. And you had to get to midnight mass between quarter after and 11:30. And if you were young, or you'd been out partying, you would typically fall asleep. And they always started mass with a flourish of trumpets. You can tell who had been partying because they elevated out of the seat. But we still have it, and we still sing, like I said, Elevate, and we cut together.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for coming, folks.
Thank you.